Hello friend, my name is Raza Masood. Today we will talk about the topic assumption log. So let me tell you that it's a very interesting topic and I'm very hopeful that you will definitely like this topic of the assumption log. So let's start our tutorial. First of all, I would request to please subscribe to my channel and also click on the bell option. So what is basically the assumption log? Before trying to understand the assumption log, let me first explain you what is basically an assumption. Friend, assumption is basically a thing that is accepted as true or as certain to happen without any proof. It's a very interesting and very funny definition that whenever we are doing planning and we have to do some plan for a project, we may accept few things and we expect that these things will happen. These are the assumptions. Remember one thing, that when we are assuming something, it is not necessary that it will be true as well. It can be incorrect as well. So let me give you an example of an assumption. For example, you are doing a project of IT in a bank and you have to send a team on site. So you are assuming that the internet connectivity would be available in the bank for the vendor for your team, and on the basis of that you do the planning. So this is the assumption, that you are assuming that the internet connectivity would be available. This is just an example. So remember one thing, that this is an assumption that internet connectivity would be available for the team. But remember one thing, that it may be true or it may be false as well. So remember one thing, assumption is basically a thing that is accepted as true or as certain to happen without any proof. So this is called the assumption. Now coming towards the main topic, assumption log. Assumption log is simply a place to log all assumptions and track the validation of each one. Because see that try to understand that basically it's a place, it's a document in which we put all the assumption, and then we follow up these assumptions. And the purpose of following up is that we are basically verifying the assumption, that it is still true or it may be incorrect. Because see one thing, that the planning or project planning is based totally dependent on the assumption. Remember that if assumption is true, so definitely it has no impact on the project planning. But if it's incorrect or if it's false, it will definitely impact your project planning, your schedule, your cost. So it is very necessary to put all the assumptions in a log, in somewhere in a document, and you need to verify after some time. You need to follow up these assumptions after some time. It is necessary, because if the assumptions become incorrect or false, it will definitely impact your project. So this is the purpose for making the assumption log. Why? To verify the things, to verify the assumption if it is still true or it's become incorrect. Now the question came, that who creates the assumption log? Basically the assumption log is created by the project manager. Project manager is a person who is managing the project, who is responsible for the failure or success of a project. So he is the person who makes the assumption log. He is responsible for making the assumption log, the document. What are the inputs to make the assumption log? Guys, all initiation documents, all planning documents like scope, contract, project plan, so all these types are the documents which are basically the input to creating and maintaining the assumption log. Whenever we talk about the risk, assumptions are made. Where schedule is planned, assumptions are made. Whenever we identify a risk, we have to make some assumptions. Whenever we are making the schedule, we have to make some assumptions. And remember one thing, that it is not necessary that assumptions would always be true, would always be correct. Assumptions can be incorrect. If assumptions become incorrect, it will definitely become a risk for your project. If and the assumptions become incorrect, it will definitely it will definitely impact negatively on it may negatively impact the schedule and cost of your project. Assumption log template. Um Assumption log template is basically assumption log is basically a document which basically project manager and team use to capture, document and track assumption throughout a project lifecycle. Each assumption should have an owner or a team member responsible for following up and validating the assumption. The assumption log assigns each assumption an ID or reference number, a name and description of each assumption, responsible person, due date, status, closure date, and any action which might be required as part of the follow-up or validation. Why we are making assumption log? Because we must have to verify the assumption after some time. It is necessary because if assumptions are incorrect, it will impact the project. And remember one thing, that it is not just the case that we just need to put the assumption in a document and forget all those things. We have to put all the assumptions in a document, and we must have to verify them, we have to follow up them, and we must have to assign these assumptions to some person. And also if any action is required associated to those assumption, then we have to take some action as well. We must have to maintain the status of these assumptions as well. And if at the early stage the assumptions will be open. Why it's open? That the open concept is that the when the assumptions verified that it is a correct assumption, then we will close it. If until unless the assumptions are not verified, it will remain open. Now the standard template for assumption is like that. It will contain the project name, ID, category, assumption, definition, what is basically a definition, what is basically the main assumption, responsibility, like who is basically assumption should be assigned to a team member to validate, due date, any particular date at which he has to accomplish the verified the assumption, status, open or close, like open means that it is not still not verified yet, and close means that it has been verified from some person and now we can close it. Action, any action associated with the assumption or validating the assumption should be listed here. Now let me give you a sample assumption log. For example, this is a sample assumption log, ID 001, category manufacturing. Assumption definition is that there is an adequate capacity on manufacturing lines to produce prototype for the project. Responsibility J Brown. Due date is basically January 6 January 2019. Status is open. Action is that J Brown to meet with the operation manager on 15th April to discuss the capacity. See, so why it's open? Because the person has to verify on particular date. It is necessary that due date should be mentioned here, and this is the date to close the assumption. Once the J Brown verified, it will be, we can close this assumption. Now next is ID 002, category design. Cable dimensions will not deviate significantly from existing product lines. Responsibility P White. 15th May 2019 is the due date to close this assumption. Status is still open. Design team is currently verifying planned cable dimensions. Remember one thing, that every assumption should have a due date. Due date means that till this date we must have to verify that the assumption is correct. Next is 003, supply is the category. Definition is there is adequate warehousing space for additional materials needed for this product. Responsibility is T Black. January 5th January 2019 is the due date. Closed, it's now status is now closed. Why? Because T Black has verified there is simple warehousing space available for the X-Wave fiber project. Why it's closed? Because T Black has already verified that this assumption is true. This is verified. Now the next is 004 planning slash execution is the category. All project resources will remain available throughout the project lifecycle. A Green is responsible to verify this assumption. 15th April 2019 is the due date. It's still open. A Green will meet with the sponsor and all functional managers on 13th March to discuss the topic. See, remember one thing, that each assumption should be assigned to some person, responsible person. Due date is necessary, status should be maintained, and the action should also be associated. And after every few days, like for example 2 weeks or 3 weeks, you should have, as a project manager, you should have to review the assumption log and check the status of every assumption. It is necessary that all assumptions should be closed. Closed means that you have verified that the assumptions are true. Remember one thing, that if assumptions are not true or incorrect, it will impact your time, cost and schedule. Now in the last we will discuss about PMP exam. Remember one thing friend, that you will definitely see few questions related to assumption or assumption log. Whenever a question came from planning or risk assessment, you may see few questions related to assumption log or assumption. So remember one thing, whenever you are checking, you are expecting few questions related to scheduling, planning, cost, time, so you will definitely see points or multiple choice options related to assumption or assumption log. So remember one thing friend, whenever we talk about assumption log, remember very important point, that if the assumption is true, there will be no impact on time, cost and schedule. But if your assumption is incorrect, your schedule, time, cost, these factors will definitely impact. And to proactive action to avoid these factors, we make the assumption log and review and follow up these assumptions on after every 2 to 3 weeks and verified that these assumptions are true. Why? Because if there is any change, if these assumptions are incorrect, so we can take some actions accordingly. Remember, if assumptions are incorrect, it will definitely impact your project plan as well. Also, as a project manager, you should have clear idea of assumption and assumption log and how to use it. Also, you need to assess that what are the consequences if assumptions are incorrect. What are the consequences? The consequences is that if assumptions are incorrect, it will impact your project plan, your cost, your schedule, etc. All these factors will definitely impact if your assumptions are incorrect. So friend, I will definitely try, I have tried my level best to explain you the concept of assumptions log, why we use it and what is the purpose of assumption log and what are the consequences of assumption log. Also we discussed that where you will definitely see few questions in the PMP exam related to assumption log. It is very true that you will definitely see approximately, I think, 4 to 5 questions specific related to assumption log. Also you will definitely see assumption or assumption log in the multiple choice questions. So just be ready for this and you should have a clear idea of assumption. In the last, I would request to please subscribe to my channel and also click on the bell option. Also share it with your friends and colleagues and also like this video. And I'm very thankful that you have seen this video, and thanks a lot for your time, and that's all from my side.